Good evening, everyone. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We're so excited to be here with all of you tonight to celebrate Be Gay, Do Crime 16 Stories of Queer Chaos. It is Pride Month around the world. Atlanta is very lucky because we have two Pride months in June and in October. And we're also gay all year. So we just want to like soak it all up. And when we saw that this book was coming out in June, we were super hyped and super excited. This book contains stories by some of our favorite writers, and as you are going to see tonight, it's a real buffet of queer chaos. So I'm going to quickly introduce our contributors, but first I'm going to introduce our moderator. Abeo Chimeka-Tisdale is a poet who loves tea, reading, listening to birds, and crafting. They can usually be found sitting in a pocket of sunlight, following their curiosity down research holes, doing yoga, or picking up a ridiculous number of holds from the library. They're a bookseller and the programming assistant at Charis Books and More and at Charis Circle. So I'm very glad to have them as a colleague. They're an incredible colleague. And their poems appear in Frozen Sea and Dead End Zine. They're also going to be our featured poet at our open mic later this month. So if you want to check out Abeo's poetry, please come back and see us later this month for that. We have with us tonight Sam Cohen. Sam Cohen is the author of Sarahland, which was a finalist for the California Golden Poppy Prize for Fiction and is currently being translated into French. Her stories appear in Bomb, Fence, Autostraddle, Electric Literature, O Magazine, and others. She now lives in Los Angeles again and is working on a novel. We also have Temim Fruchter. Temim is a queer, non-binary, anti-Zionist Jewish writer who lives in Brooklyn, New York. She holds an MFA in fiction from the University of Maryland and is the recipient of fellowships from the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, Vermont Studio Center, and a 2020 Rona Jaffe Foundation Writers Award. She is co-host of Pete's Reading Series in Brooklyn, City of Laughter from Grove Atlantic Books, a New York Times editor's pick, is her debut novel. Alissa Nutting is a novelist and screenwriter. Her shows include the animated series Teenage Euthanasia on Max and the Max series Made for Love. She's author of the novels Tampa and Made for Love and the collection Unclean Jobs for Women and Girls. And finally, Emily Austin is the author of We Could Be Rats, Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, Interesting Facts About Space, and the poetry collection Gay Girl Prayers. She was born in Ontario, Canada. She studied English literature and library science at Western University, and she currently lives in Ottawa, in the territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. So welcome to you all. All of your books have in one way or another been favorites at Charis, and have been on staff picks and been works that are have been really like handed from one to another. So it's a real special thing to have you all here. Abeo, I'm going to hand it off to you, but before I do, I'm just going to say that folks, you are welcome to put your questions in the chat at any time, and Abeo will work them into this conversation. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Abeo, for hosting tonight. We're so glad to kick off Pride with all of you.
All right. I'm so excited. I love this collection. I love y'all's stories. I'm so excited to get to spend time with y'all, talk more about them today. We're going to start off with a sampling platter, some little excerpts from all of the stories to give y'all a little taste. So I'm going to pass it over to Temim to get us started with redistribution.
Thank you. Okay, just the beginning of redistribution. At the famous writer's house, the lights were always on. This wasn't privileged information. Anyone at all could see it, walking past at dusk when all other kitchens and living rooms pooled with golden light that illuminated dinner prep or cartoons or cocktails. People in the neighborhood didn't seem to care for curtains, or at least the people who had something to show off. But at the famous writer's house, it was every room. Each window was a bright block, revealing high shelves of books or mysterious abstract sculptures or assemblies of lush plants. It wasn't the only large house in the neighborhood, but it was the only one that never went dark.
All right, over to you, Alissa, for a little bit of peep show.
I do my best not to stare at Sabine at work. Actually, that isn't true. I do my best not to get caught staring at Sabine at work. So on certain days, if I'm feeling downright bratty, I need to get caught, but only by Sabine. I grow more and more brazen in my glances until I see her roll her eyes and shake her head, seemingly in frustration at her computer, an elegant way of camouflaging a response to me. Fine, I see you. Stop already. Or maybe that's all in my head. For Sabine, I'll try to be as honest as possible telling this story. I say that even as I imagine her correction. No, I'm not telling the story for me. An act of narrative trepanning, writing the words to ease the pressure of guilt inside my skull. She'd say my telling this has little to do with her, and even less to do with honesty. Sabine tends to be right, so maybe it's better to start with lies.
Thank you. Over to Emily for Grand Beaver Cabin.
All right, before I start, I just want to apologize for having a cold. So if my camera goes off while people are talking, it's because I'm blowing my nose. So just wanted to share that with everyone. All right, I've been entering children's coloring contests. I sign my name Abigail, age 6. I write the G's backwards to fool the judges. My artistic ability is weak for a 31-year-old. However, my fine motor skills blow most children out of the water. There is rarely competition. So far, I've won one 5-foot-tall chocolate rabbit, 2 child-sized bicycles, 1 coupon for a free bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken. I ate the chicken, sold the bikes, and dismembered the rabbit. He's chopped up in my freezer. When I'm hankering for something sweet, I gnaw on his frozen remains. One hunk of his face has a white fondant eye adhered to it. The eye has no iris or pupil. It looks like the rabbit has suffered some sort of macular degeneration, or like he's seen a ghost. I'm saving that piece. I'm going to eat it when something special happens.
Thank you. Sam with Operation Hyacinth. Oh, you're muted.
It wasn't like we all thought it was so great or anything before the developers came. To the contrary, as Avi, our resident academic, might say. We'd moved in our 20s and didn't anticipate still being here 20 years later. We'd imagined real houses, 2 bathrooms with those rectangular white sinks, partners, living rooms with Christmas trees. Time had seemed abundant. And then while we were falling in love and breaking up and looking for gigs and making our art and talking about the world and what we wanted from it, it narrowed and disappeared. We were still here.
All right. Thank you all so much. It was so cool getting to hear your stories, the beginnings of them in your voices. And I think it did a great job of giving people a little taste of the breadth of these stories and the voices that are within this collection. My first question is, I'm thinking about the notion of airing dirty laundry and how within marginalized communities, what is underneath that framing is the notion that we'll be safe if we are not looked at or not perceived as bad by our. Obviously, there are a lot of shortcomings within that idea. So connecting to these stories and this collection as a whole, why do y'all feel that it's necessary to tell stories with complex, flawed, imperfect, bad queer characters?
I think we're all hesitant to be the first person to speak.
I can speak. I think that, first of all, obviously, it's important to create real characters and put real life on the page. Like, that's the whole job of writing fiction. And I don't think that I'm interested in a project of like sanitizing queer characters and making them palatable to the mainstream, right? Like, I'm writing stories where I can see myself and my friends and other people like me. I think with this story in particular, I don't know that I even felt like I was writing flawed queer characters. Like, I did actually want to kind of create a little group of queer heroes who were going to save their bungalow complex from gentrification and do this like big organized crime together of robbing banks. And like, in some ways, I think that they were the most sort of righteous, collaborative, activist and productive characters that maybe I've written.
Mm. Yeah, that's so true about part of it being wanting to have honest depictions of like whole people and not caricatures. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, growing up, not even just growing up, I think just even in younger adulthood, um, I don't know, there was this transition from there being so many stories that were where the queerness was like the twist, the point, the main event. And I still hold a place in my heart for like, a coming out story, or like queerness is a big event sometimes. But I don't know. I think one of the most refreshing like changes in my life in terms of that kind of discourse in queer storytelling is like sometimes the people just happen to be gay, and sometimes they're gay and like complicated, or they're evil. And it's so refreshing because I don't know, I think a lot of early writers feel this way, or I can speak for myself, where I wanted to, in some ways, to write utopias. I didn't want to punish my characters. I didn't want to punish them by having bad things happen to them, or punish them by having them look bad. And I think the permission to like to kind of not really think about it that way, but just think about characters as really dimensional, almost human on the page, was really exciting, because then it's just like really anything goes. They're human people. They're messy, messy queers.
Yeah. All right.
I was gonna say, in Canada did you guys get Degrassi in America? I don't know if this is okay.
Yeah.
So Degrassi has stories that, especially like the older ones, has stories that are really focused on like a character coming out, and it felt like those stories were for like a straight cis audience, and now it feels like I feel very privileged to be writing at this time, because it feels like when I write a book, I'm not thinking, oh, the audience of this is heterosexual straight people, so I have to make sure that I package this in a way that they don't get the wrong impression, or that the reality is that people, it's for queer people, and maybe some heterosexual people are in there too, but I'm not necessarily thinking of them when I'm writing.
Yeah, that point about audience is really a good point. Okay. Like Temim mentioned, this is a collection of messy queers. So aside from these overarching themes of queerness and chaos, there are some other themes and questions that show up throughout the collection. Questions surrounding the nuclear family, the institution of the family, being misunderstood, gentrification, childhood trauma, revenge and cosmic redistribution, surveillance, empowerment, and taking back power. So how did y'all decide what question or topic you wanted your story to revolve around? Like Sam mentioned, gentrification is something that her story is dealing with. So like how did y'all like come to those themes that you're teasing out in your stories?
With mine, whenever I start to write something, I always write like a little snippet. Like before I write a book, even, I'm like, okay, this book is going to be about like, a lesbian who works at a Catholic church or whatever. And the short story I wrote in this one, I had written this snippet. Normally I write those snippets and then I don't write, or I try to write the story and I'm like, oh, this sucks. But I wrote this snippet that was like, oh, this is someone who keeps entering children's coloring contests. And the way that I was engaged in this was uh, I was told the premise is that we need a short story that has to do with a gay person in crime. So I went through my documents to be like, okay, do I have any little snippets that are a bit of a crime? So I wasn't thinking as thoughtfully as your question was phrased. I was more like, okay, this person is committing a crime. So I worked from that.
I mean, honestly, that makes it more impressive, the themes that do end up coming out in your story, like within queer community, like intergenerational care and looking out for folks younger than us and making connections with folks that are older than us. So you did it, even though you weren't thinking about it.
That's a nice comment. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I made a list of crimes. I think when I say like these characters feel like the most righteous characters in some ways that I've written, it's like I think that for all like my own small rebellions, my character's small rebellions, and maybe like some of the leftist and radical themes in my teaching and writing, like I'm a pretty lawful person in a really fucked up world. And so Temim, I haven't read your story and I'm interested in the themes of redistribution, but I mean, that was a kind of what I could think about was the redistribution of wealth and resources. And at first I wanted to do some kind of hacking, but I'm like, this is too hard to figure. I don't want to learn about hacking. And every time I came back to LA to visit while I was doing this visiting professorship, like whole blocks would be bought by developers and just like places I loved would be gone. And um, I came back and one of my best friends whose house I was just at all the time that really felt like a place to return home. It was this bungalow complex that was being sold after she'd been living there for like 20 years. And so I'm like, okay, this is like the crime. How do we get it back? And I started researching the George Jackson Brigade, which was much more fun to learn about than hacking. And listening to podcasts about bank robbers and kind of feeling like you can actually rob banks. This is possible. Like it's probably not going to work out, but people do it, and so I felt like my characters could do it as a way to get their bungalow complex back.
I love that. Like, yeah, you can rob a bank. Um, my I feel that my title is somewhat misleading because not intentionally, but I, there is no righteousness in my story, and there's really not really any justice. I thought when I got the prompt for this book, I was really excited about it, and then I was like, I haven't really written crimes. I've written like people doing selfish, messy, self-destructive things. And so I also thought about, what can I do? How can I kind of write about queers like going after justice? And I ended up just, there is in the vicinity of my home, there is a home that belongs to a famous writer, and I found myself kind of like fixating on that home. And this, the story's not about that actual home, but I think I was like just really enchanted by the idea of like somebody really almost being a voyeur, like projecting all of this stuff onto a stranger's home. And I was like, okay, I guess my queers aren't going to be righteous. They're going to be selfish and messy and self-destructive. So but I mean, my favorite thing to do is to write about like, just the absolute messiness of relationships, especially queer relationships, and those sort of gray areas in particularly queer relationships and the queer imagination, where it's like, you know, where like a lot of different gears are turning, and it's some of it is good and some of it is just awful, and most of it is somewhere in between.
Yeah, like I'll jump like on the messy train. Like my answer's really messy. So, like I'll try to make it coherent, but I like like comp het like got me like hard. Like I had two like marriages to cis men, before I was just like I'm just like, really bi. I'm just like really, really bi, like I just like accidentally, like sleep with women when I get drunk, like every time. You know what I mean? And like I was raised super Catholic, and so like this is my first like published in a book, like piece of queer fiction. So I had a lot of I think I was just like thinking a lot about surveillance anyway, because I'm just like very, like my whole kind of life, I think like it really got to this kind of critical, it sounds very dramatic, but um like it kind of like flipped from being this thing of like, oh, I hope like no one ever like knows this or figures this out, to like if I don't show the side of myself, like I think it will, like I don't know how to go on, like being alive kind of. So like being seen and being perceived, and particularly, I mean, sometimes still, if you like, search my name or Wikipedia, like the first word that will come up after is like husband, so I was just sort of like really thinking a lot about, yeah, just kind of like about sexuality and surveillance, and I think probably also subconsciously having a lot of like feelings of like fraudulence, or like inauthenticity, like I was worried about getting kicked out, I'm like, what if like, they find out I was like married to two men in my past, like will like will it be revoked, like will they take me out of it? Like I just had all of these like very insecure feelings. So I was also kind of like thinking about like delineating between, crime as in like the law, and like crime as in like morality and ethics, like I would say like the protagonist like really commits a crime, and like the crime that like her legal crime is that she steals a dog, but I think like her actual crime is like she can't like let go of like the privilege that sort of like the heterosexual male, gaze for her affords her. And like that's her crime, like she betrays like herself and her girlfriend because she like can't let go of that. So I was just, yeah, I was thinking like a lot about sort of like actual crime, like so many things that are crimes are not crimes. Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is one of the strengths of the collection is that, like you're saying, how your story does it, but like throughout the collection also teasing out like what really is criminal. Like, is it the gentrification or is it the people trying to stay in their homes? So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely that. Sam touched a bit on this in her last answer about not wanting to do a bunch of research on hackers, but wanting to do more research on the George Jackson Brigade. Um, Something that I really enjoyed about all of these stories is how immersive they were. I was immediately like pulled into the logics, desires, worlds of these characters, and the detail and specificity of the writing played a really large role in that for me. In these stories, we learn about home brewing, the 10 Commandments, expensive home decor, AI tech startups, cross country bank robberies, a beaver themed hotel. So I'm curious about the role that research plays within you all's writing process. I can say a bit more too. Like, do you write about things that you're already curious about that you want to learn more about? Or does the writing sometimes tell you what you then need to like research and dive deeper into?
Mine, I didn't have to research beaver themed hotels, but there's something called the Great Wolf Lodge. Do you guys have that too?
Yes, I've
Yeah.
been.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that a lot because I was thinking I have a nephew and I was like, oh, I should take my nephew to the Great Wolf. And then I was like, that's weird that that exists. And I was like, oh, what would be a weirder one? I was looking up pictures of the Great Wolf Lodge, but yeah, didn't. I tend to think, I do tend to think about things I have some experience with. I don't know if that's just being lazy Or I didn't with this story, but with previous things, I have thought like, oh, I'm interested in hyperfixating on like the history of the Bible or space or something, and then I might do that. But I think my story might be the worst example of having to do much research, because I pulled from my own, except for looking up the Great Wolf Lodge, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, hyperfixation is about the extent of it for me. Like just like walking around my neighborhood and walking around, by this house and thinking about, how I might refract my experience into fiction. I mean, I think for me, research is like, it's a neurodivergent process of like, it's a mixed bag. Sometimes it's very linear and sometimes it's like magical thinking or like obsessing or just like feeling smitten by something or someone. But I did feel like this was a good opportunity to sort of obsess about like, I've never broken into a stranger's house, but like, what would that be like? The great thing about writing fiction is like, if you're not writing about hacking, you don't actually have to know what it's like. I just imagined a fancy house, probably wrong, but
All right. Thank you.
I can answer. I just wanted to let Alissa go first if she wanted to.
Oh, I didn't research.
mm,
I'm so impressed by people who read. Like, I wish I were that kind of writer. I feel like I'd be a much better writer if I had that type of brain.
um, I no, I guess I do research, but I think that sometimes it's like for this, it was sort of like I just really felt like I wanted to write about a real crime and I wanted it to work and I wanted it right. Like I wanted something that felt like where I convinced myself like I could do this. And I wanted like maybe the reader to feel like I could rob a bank too, right? And it just wasn't going to work unless I got there. And so I don't know. I mean, I think I'm not good at researching if it's boring. Like that is why I think that I didn't do the hacking story because eventually it was boring to me. But I think if it's something like, oh wow, there are all of these people who've done bank robberies. Like one of the ones with a lot of podcasts was this woman who just like did it for fun, like small amounts and small tents. I mean, it ended up to be a very sad story. But for a while she was just like robbing banks as kind of a thrill. And it was, so it was a really interesting thing to learn about all of this. And I think that it's kind of circular for me, where sometimes if I'm stuck with writing or kind of have an idea but don't know how to go there, it'll give me kind of an opportunity to go more deeply into something that I'm curious about with like a purpose. And yeah.
Yeah, it definitely was instructive. And I did, as a reader, leave your story feeling like I could rob a bank. So the research paid off. And that was really cool hearing about how you all approach it differently. These next two are going to be some short story craft questions. How did you all decide like who the speaker would be, who that like main narrating voice was going to be?
I really like I guess like I knew I wanted to do the interiority of first person because I feel like so much of crime is secrecy. And yeah, I sort of liked the confessional, kind of aspects, like what other people know and like what you do like admit to or confess to, and then like what only you know. And I really enjoy first person for being able to convey both of those at the same time, and then like seeing what's different about sort of what you tell, what you confess, and what you don't confess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for mine, I really enjoyed it's like a close third person perspective. And I For some reason, I just gave the protagonist the letter M as a name. I didn't give her any more name than that, and I kind of enjoyed that. And then, of course, because I was fictionalizing the house of a real famous writer, I kept saying in my head the famous writer's house, and it was a little fun to just be like, almost these, I mean, not archetypes, but they were sort of just like blank. They were like Mad Lib blanks of
Mhm.
people, of characters in my mind. And it was fun. It was like a little shadowy, a little cautionary tale, a little like anonymous. So that like kind of delighted me as I was writing.
Um, I really like a we narrator in general. Like I think I've just been writing from a we perspective for a long time before like someone told me I was doing that. It's just that comes naturally, but I think this I knew I wanted it to be a group that was collaborating on this crime together. And so there is a we narrator and someone who read the story for me when I was like, is this crazy? Can I send it to people? Pointed out that it's a we that has no I, like the rest of it is just in third person. And they were like, that's a crazy thing to do. Which I mean, so I guess the answer to your question is the we came intentionally because I did want this group of solidarity. But then I realized that there's like no I within the we, just like a bunch of then third person perspectives. But I decided that I liked the weirdness of that and was just going to go with it.
I like the weirdness of it too. All of you write across different genres or forms of writing. You write novels, poems, TV shows, short stories. So I'm curious about if your writing process changes depending on the form that you're writing in.
Whenever I write anything, I always sort of think of sort of a pitch first, maybe. Like I always will open a document and I'll be like, okay, this is about X. This is what this is. And then I'm not someone who plans a lot. I think I probably should do that a little bit more, but I'm not. I have that little snippet at the top of my document, and then I'm like, okay, this is a story about someone who's entering children's coloring contests. Why would they do that? What kind of person would do that? And then that's how. So it seems to be the same for short stories. I haven't written short stories in a long time, so it's fun to write this one. And yeah, but I found it was sort of similar to how I write a book.
Do you do the same thing with poems? You like write at the top what it's going to be about?
Yeah, well, I wrote one poetry collection that was really like thematic. It was like uh, uh, queer retelling of biblical passages. So yeah, it was. I was like, okay, this is a poetry collection that is a feminist queer retelling of. So I think I did, but that poetry is a little bit different, I would say, than because everything is. I didn't think for every poem. I didn't think, okay, I'm going to write a snippet. I did for the whole collection, but I think that's because of how I wrote that. I think in general, if I were writing a poem, it would be different. But
Yeah, it's just such a good question. I think for I was just telling someone today when I write a novel, I feel like I like it's not like I circle it the center. It's like I walk in like a spiral, like I have to get closer and closer to the center. Um when I write a short story, I mean it's just logistics because there's less space to circle and spiral around. I think with a short story, it's like it just I don't know. I actually haven't written one in a while. Like I think this was after a dry spell of short stories. And it's there's so little space. Like it's more like pacing back and forth in a small room than it is like circling a big like center of a thing. So that's my abstract answer. I don't think I approach it that differently, but like it's almost like the mechanics of it feel different in my brain.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I like that image of pacing in a room versus the circling in a larger space. All right, I've got 2 more questions, and then I'm going to open it up for audience questions. So just a reminder that folks can pop questions in the Q&A, which is on the right side. It's a little box on the right side of your screen. All right, so the ending of these stories vary from more like resolved endings, cliffhangers, and all the places in between. In an LGBTQ Reads article where some of y'all were in there discussing the inspiration and thinking behind your stories, Matt Crane said that they wanted to resist giving the character a compassionate arc and a tidy, healed ending. They wanted to let them misbehave, let them fuck up, and let them hope against hope anyway. So how did y'all decide the tone of your ending and the type of closure you wanted to give, if any, that you wanted to give your character and the reader?
I mean, maybe this is a way to kind of address the last question too, which I didn't really have an answer to, but I think I usually am writing these kind of messy relationships, messy queers, complex people, and I want a lot of psychological and emotional realism, and maybe there's less easy resolution. And I think for this, I just like, it's a really crazy story that I don't know if it is like good in a literary sense, but I just really wanted it to be this sort of like crazy romp where they figure out how to steal banks and figure out how to rob banks and like get their complex back. And I wanted this sort of happy ending for everybody. And so it was really fun to write, I think, because I'm like, I'm like I kind of have the arc in advance and I'm just gonna figure out how to make it happen.
I was so glad that they got a happy ending.
Oh.
I think I was very clear that I didn't want like a meditative ending. Like I think I'm sometimes prone to the like meditative ending or the like, you know, the like slightly ambiguous ending. And I think my ending is a little ambiguous, but I was like, Temim, you have like this has to be like bad. Like you have to leave things in like kind of a bad place, which is actually very challenging for me. So I just like I'm like whatever happens next is either going to be bad or just deeply weird. It was actually fun, you know, to make myself do that instead of like rounding it out even like a sort of ambiguous way. And I thought this book was a great place to like dare myself in that way.
I did find one thing I found different about writing a short story versus a novel is that it is there's a sort of liberation, and you know when you write a novel, it's like you have to explain why they did that, or you know there's got to be some sort of resolution to every little thing. But short stories kind of liberate you from that, which was interesting and sort of refreshing. And I felt like I had to tie maybe like one thing up in it, and I didn't necessarily have to tie every possible thing up in it. And I sort of feel compelled to do more so tie everything up in a novel, not everything, but you know, like 80%. I felt like I only had to tie 10% up in in a short story. So
Yeah, I knew I wanted like my character to like get away with like her legal crime, but like face consequences, you know, for like her kind of like crime of the soul, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. And like you know, like she didn't learn, you know, and I don't know. I'm just like I think it's fascinating to me when you know there are like horrific consequences and like you know the character just clings to delusion instead of you know like giving into personal growth. I don't know, there's just like something like I find very interesting and autobiographical about that, so that's why I'm done that way.
Thanks, y'all. All right. In Operation Hyacinth, there is a line. It was a good ghost line, a line that would haunt. So what is something that you want your readers to take away or be haunted by after reading your story?
A great question.
I'll say that one thing I was haunted by. I now feel like I could rob a bank, and that's I can't do it, but I feel like I could do it.
You're haunted by the urge.
Yeah.
In mine, the sort of crux of it is about caring about younger generations and wanting things to be better for people. You know, sometimes just like thinking just online, for example, sometimes I'll see like, you know, people being upset at the idea of like student loans being forgiven because they had to pay their own student loans. And I feel this like, no, like, come on, you want it to be better for other people. So that's sort of what I was trying to get at in my story.
Yeah, my character doesn't rob a bank, but she does kind of rob a house and kind of intrudes. And I think, I wanted similarly in a kind of like more haunting way to kind of play on this feeling of like it would be like I walk by this house a lot. I think about like, my partner and I joke about how much I'm like obsessed with telling people about this house. And I'm like, what would like it would take nothing for me to, I mean, not nothing. I would probably fail and be very clumsy about it, but like I could just walk in the door one day. And so like I think the haunting thing for me is how like easy and like fluid that line is between imagining the thing, obsessing about the thing, and just simply doing the thing and falling into it and finding yourself in some rich author's bathtub.
My character like really like robs herself. And so I mean I guess like that was sort of something that it's like a concept I find very haunting, like, and kind of like our pursuit of, either like goals or certain forms of safety, that we're like trying, to balance like what like when are we robbing ourselves and when are we assimilating in a way that's like, necessary or understandable, and like not compromising ourselves, but just, surviving.
Um, I mean, I think as I'm talking about this, I'm really recognizing that at the time I was teaching this class called Queer Futures and really like trying to convince these students to imagine solidarity, to imagine possible futures, because that seems like the hardest thing to do right now. And, for the last several years. And so I'm like, oh, I think I was like, like drinking my own Kool-Aid or something. But also, I'm glad. I don't think you should rob a bank. Things don't tend to end well for people who do. But I guess what I wanted, and like I think that question of like, are the gentrifiers or like who's the real criminal is like clear, but I think that I wanted to kind of show how kind of powerless everyone feels. Like the person who owns the property, who feels like she has to sell it, is really bullied into it and feels like she's going to be able to provide for her siblings and her family if she sells. And like there's all these people who like eventually everyone's hands feel tied because these developers have so much power. And so really like the landlady becomes part of like their solidarity in the end too. It doesn't really make sense for her to sell her property to them, but she does. And it's partly because her mother as a ghost is helping facilitate all of it. And so it really takes a lot of sort of like magic, solidarity. But I think that maybe if I want people to be haunted by something, it's that question of like, what could we do together, or who could we see as a potential ally?
Mm.
Like, how could we be more powerful than we think?
Yeah. Thanks, y'all, for sharing your stories and your haunting ambitions. We've got one question from the audience so far. The first one is, you are all funny. Can you talk about the role of humor in your work?
Whenever I start to write something, I always think, oh, this I want this to be funny. This will be my funny book. And even in this one, I'm like, oh, okay, I'll write a funny short story. But then it always ends up being like the story I wrote has a lot to do with um, like queer generations and wanting it to be better for people, the next folks. And I didn't sit down writing to plan. I sat down thinking it's funny for someone to enter coloring contests when they're an adult. That'll be a funny premise. And then, but yeah, so my hope is always to be funny, and then it always ends up being less funny than I thought, and it's sort of sad, or it has some negative thing creeps into it.
I just think it's so. Go ahead, Sam.
Okay, I was gonna say I have kind of the opposite, where I think that it took me a while to know that I was funny. And I think I tried to be a serious writer for a while, and then like, before I had anything published, I would do readings sometimes, because I don't know, I was here in LA and went to CalArts, where there was just like a lot of gallery and performance stuff, and people would really laugh, and it at first I think made me insecure, and then I started to embrace that I might be a funny writer.
I think it's such a central part of the way I move through the world, is like is humor, is like both culturally, as like an Eastern European Jew. I feel like that's so baked into like my family and my inheritances, but it's also just like it's what makes being human like bearable and delightful and fun. And I don't know, I just think it's fun. Like I often just I don't know, it's probably this like annoying writer thing that like people who are live with writers feel, but I'll be like chuckling at something I've written, and my partner will be like, "What are you laughing at?" "Oh, you're yeah." And it's like, I mean, it's like, look, I know I'm not that funny, but it delighted me. So like, I don't know. So I think it's just like, it gives, even when I'm writing stuff that's kind of serious or, pretty earnest, it gives me this other dimension to kind of humanize my characters, and also just like have a good time writing them.
Yeah. I don't feel like I'm like a good enough writer to not be funny. I really need, like, it does a lot of work. It's really holding up the barn, there's not a lot there. If you take it out, it'll all fall apart.
That is not true. It was great writing, but it was also very funny. Okay, I'll ask one more question, a silly one, before I welcome ER back. In Redistribution, there was a line that I loved. The narrator has been broken up with frequently and says that to leave someone for once is on their bucket list. So what's something on y'all's bucket list?
What a great question. Like, all the questions have been so good. I just want to say.
Oh, thank you.
Truly.
Like, it's so like, it's hard to make a bucket list. You kind of have to acknowledge that you're gonna die. And yeah, I think like that's my first step. Like step one is like, accept death. And then I can like get going with the rest of it. But that's definitely on there because I'm gonna die.
For me, my one bucket list item was to write a book. So I've joked before that like, oh, I'm all done. Now I really got to face that problem.
I feel like when I'm asked like about my favorite books at a public event, I feel like I've never read a book. And right now I feel like I've never had a single desire. Like I'm like, what? No. I'm like, is there some celebrity I want to try to woo? I did just go to Iceland, so I feel like
Ooh.
that. I mean,
That's
we're
a
gonna
big one.
be like pretty like textbook about it. That was one.
You should break into that writer's house near you. That should be your.
That's right. I don't have any other plans tonight, so
There you go.
yeah.
Temim, I'm gonna text you and ask the name of the writer. Um, but I feel the same way. I'm like, I don't want to do anything. I don't know. Am I done? I don't know. I have nothing to say.
That's okay. We've got one more Q&A question. Do your characters continue to live in your head even after the story is finished and published? Which I'm also curious about.
I think like I don't know if I think there's like I'm sure it's some kind of like psychological defense mechanism or something, but like I really like to like if I do something, I really like especially if it's like something that's not good, I really like to sort of like compare it, like to certain character, where I'm like, oh, that's so them, or like this character would really get a kick out of that, like they're I don't know. I do really feel like they become like your sort of like partners in crime, like or just like people that you can kind of like imagine would understand, like parts of your impulses, that maybe others wouldn't. Like those are kind of the ones that linger for me where it's like a part of me that like I want to like not be judged by or feel understood by,
Mm.
but I'm ashamed of, like I feel like they really like kind of give me a buddy in that way, where I'm like, well, if I told her, she would laugh, like she would think it's funny. Yeah.
I love that. I do that while I'm writing. I'll think like while I'm out in my life, like I'm having a conversation with someone, I'll be like, oh, I'm obsessed over the thing I'm writing. So I'll imagine how the character would respond. But after I finish writing something and it's done, I don't at all, to the point that it's like it's sort of hard to talk about even like the book that I wrote, because the way publishing works, like this is a little different, but the way publishing works is like, it takes a long time for it to actually come out. So it's been like a year since you were working on it. You've written something else, and then people will be like, they'll ask you thoughtful questions about a character, for example, and I'm like, I haven't thought about that lady in a really long time. I don't know. And sometimes people will ask you like, oh, do you think they would do XYZ? And I always think, you know just as well as me. Like they're out in the world, they're for you now. I don't know. I don't know anything.
It does kind of feel proportional. Like I do think a lot of the characters I've written in short stories, with a couple exceptions, feel like we had a short but meaningful fling, and like, and it's over. And I think, I only have one and two in progress novel under my belt, but I do think those characters have stayed with me a little bit more just because of the amount of time I spent with them.
Um, I've only written short fiction. I haven't finished my novel that I'm working on, which maybe that's my bucket list item, though I don't want to like die after I hope to finish it relatively soon. Um, so I don't know because it's like right. I have the flingy feeling too, but then like I don't know. I think if I get asked questions about one or someone, then that's I have too much.
Oh, your sound cut out at the end there. Your sound cut out at the end, Sam.
Oh, I just said my dog's barking, so I'm just gonna mute myself and stop
Oh.
answering. But maybe now she's done. But anyway, I think that if someone talks about a character, even from a short story, it's like, oh yeah, her, like, and I do really know her, and maybe that is part of the fling feeling that Tamim is describing.
Mm. Well, thank y'all all so much for putting these words on the page, putting them out into the world, letting me hold them in my hand, and chatting with me tonight. I'm gonna welcome ER back to close us out.
I'm going to try to come back. Well, I'll talk to y'all from here because hold on one second. Let's see. There we go. All right. Thank y'all so much. This was so fun, Abeo. Your questions were so good. And I learned so much about all of your stories and your writing process. So thank you. I'm sure that everyone watching at home is going to want to buy this book. It is hot off the presses. It is on so many of the best of the summer reading lists. So be ahead of the curve. Take this to the beach or the pool and click this teal button at the bottom center of the screen to buy Be Gay, Do Crime from Charis. It really does help us when you buy event books from us. Another quick plug for a way that you can support us. We have a nonprofit. We are participating in Give Out Day, which is a day of philanthropy for queer organizations. Charis is 80% small donor funded, which means that your like $10 gifts really help us. It also means that nobody can really tell us what to do except for you. So if you want to help us stay in business, you can click that teal button and basically it'll help us win prizes. And click that link. I mean, you should also click the teal button to buy the book. But if you would also like to donate to our nonprofit, $10 really helps us. Every unique donation we get helps us win prizes on June 5th. So help us get our numbers up. We really appreciate you. Help us do more events like this. So thank you all so much for your beautiful words. We would love to have you back another time for all of your future books, and keep writing. Please keep being gay and doing crimes of all kinds for the revolution and otherwise. And we'll see you next time. Take care.